Is complaining a sin? Some people would say, well, that's not a sin to complain. I mean, they got my order wrong, right? Well, it's okay to state your case, and it's okay to state how you're feeling about something. It's okay to express anger in its proper mode and context, right? But complaining, anytime we complain, I think we need to go back and see, how does God respond to the Israelites every time they complain? It's not good. It's not good. Because it really is an expression of ingratitude. It's an expression of bitterness. It's an expression of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And then, of course, we see this issue of Lashon Hara, this gossip that's going on in chapter 12, when Miriam and Aaron, they attack Moses over his marriage to a Cushite woman. Never come against somebody's marriage, ever. That's important. God strikes them with tzarat, and of course the rabbis teach that lashon hara, or gossip, evil speech about somebody, even if it's true, is something that would merit leprosy in those days. And so, anyhow, wonderful Torah portion. I encourage you to go and go back and read through it if you haven't already done so in this afternoon. In this Shabbat, as you're kind of musing around the home, take some time to be holy and read the portion if you haven't done that. But want to pick back up in 1 Corinthians and where we are, and we're going to be in chapter 1. And I'm impressed with Rav Shaul as he addresses the Kahilah, the assembly, mostly Gentiles. Again, you get the backdrop of this back in in Acts chapter 18, where Paul goes and he visits Corinth. And it's kind of cool. We talked about a couple of weeks, just to track back with that. We talked about there is some historical evidence that we have archaeologically where we can pinpoint that Paul was in Corinth sometime around 51 to 52 AD. This is like, within a 20-year radius of when Yeshua rose again from the dead. He's writing to the Corinthians around 54 AD to 55 AD. So again, and he's writing from Ephesus. We know that from the end of the book. And so you get the tale of that in Acts chapter 20 when he's in Ephesus. But nevertheless, 1 Corinthians is a dialogue. It's a dialogue. It's really an issue that had been raised. There were issues that had been raised with the Kahilah, the assembly there in Corinth. They had some issues, and so they write to Paul. In fact, we know that there's another letter that Paul had written to the Corinthians prior to this one. And of course, we don't know anything about what happened to that. We get that from some evidence in the book itself, as you will see later as you track through 1 Corinthians. And then, of course, he writes 2 Corinthians. We think that he may have written to the Corinthians as many as 4 times. But there are major issues that are going on in Corinth. And I find it significant that if you want to know what's important in his thought process, you look at this dialogue. What were the major issues in Corinth? And I find it interesting that you can kind of get an insight on what were the major issues in Corinth. You can also tell what was not very important to them as well. And so I'm reminded of some of this, that when we make issues a certain issue, that if we look back at what they're addressing and talking about in the apostolic community, in the writings of the New Testament, we kind of get an insight of what's important. We need to measure what are our issues that we're raising today, and do they coincide with some of those issues. And it's interesting that there is parallel and carryover, but sometimes the Messianic movement, I think we raise issues that may not have necessarily been an issue in the apostolic community.